All right, so it's 12 o'clock now, so we can get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Diversified Planning Solutions Mentoring Forum, our second web series. Today we have Linda Clayton, who's going to be talking about women in the workplace. Before we get started, I wanted to talk about our Cal Lutheran University today. This webinar series is brought to you by Cal Lutheran. Specifically the financial planning program. We have 2 degrees, the MBA in financial planning, which provides students with the skills needed to transform a planning practice into planning business or pursue a leadership position with a firm. We also have an MS degree in financial planning, and it's designed for students who want to specialize in a particular aspect of financial planning or wealth management by choosing from a variety of electives. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mark Edwards, who's going to introduce our wonderful speaker for today.
Thank you, Greg. I am pleased to have Linda as one of our early speakers. She's a wonderful person to know personally, but I think that she's also just been a wonderful asset for this industry. And I've never run into somebody who networks quite as well as Linda does. There isn't anybody in the Ventura County, in Los Angeles chapter, nor in the Orange County chapter of the FPA who does not seem to know her. So Linda Clayton has a bachelor's degree in history from UCLA, an MBA degree in financial planning from CLU, where she is also an adjunct professor and is a certified financial planner. She holds a Series 7 and a Series 66 licenses and is a licensed California insurance agent. Linda is a wealth advisor specializing in life planning through Cetera Advisor Networks. She works with multi-generational families and especially with women in transition. As a side note, I've known Linda as a student, as a teacher, and as a planner for over 10 years. And when it comes to working with clients, I can tell you, I take a distant back seat to her. So, as Greg noted, as planners, we put at least as much emphasis, or we should, on working with our client as we do with the plan itself. So, like Mars and Venus, women as clients, especially wives, are clearly different from men. So with that, Linda's going to be speaking on working with women clients. So I give you Linda Clayton.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and welcome everyone. I'm going to start with a quote that really spoke to me about working with women, and that is, women look at money as a lake, perceiving it as a finite resource. Men look at it as a river, constantly renewing. And that was from Liz Pearl. She was a publisher and worked a lot encouraging entrepreneurs. And so it really points to the fact that when you're working with women, that there are some differences in the way that men and women perceive money. And it started culturally, I think, because the fact that women were not always encouraged to get in control of their finances. There was a division, perhaps in many of your own families. You recognize that when you were in school, the women were pointed toward home ec, and PE was dance, and the men were pointed more toward financial courses, and that was culturally acceptable. There was a period where women felt that it was their role to depend on their husbands to provide and to manage the finances, and their role was to take care of the household and the children, and that was fine until something happened. And the husband would pass away, and the woman would be terrified and grieving at the same time, not involved already in the finances, and having nowhere, that doesn't even know where to start because they didn't take an active role. And thankfully that is changing. However, there is still a gap, and there's still work to do. And if you're working with clients, you may see this already. Women have a hard time, even those really professional leaders of their field, in valuing themselves and their services and asking for a raise, in doing things that step outside that gender perception that they were raised with. And when you sit down with clients, you often ask them about their money stories, and the money stories that a lot of your clients can tell you about with their families is there was this division where women were not as empowered in many cases. And so that's something that we need to work with and address. And it's still the case that women make 82 cents for every dollar that a man makes, and that women still are learning how to manage not only their money, but they tend to still also take those family roles on, be in charge of the household, in charge of the children. So it's more work for them to find time to prioritize this in many cases, and that's one of the things that we need to work with. So women's retirement account balances lag behind men's, and yet they need to last longer. And that has to do with several factors. First of all, women tend to live longer. Right now it's down to about 5 years, but they need to live longer and make the money last longer because they live longer. And women take time away from the workplace, either to raise children, and that's starting to change, that men are allowed to take time away too, but primarily it's the woman that takes the time. And then when they're caring for infirm family members or elderly, they step away again. And it used to be that they were passed over for promotions because the workplace thought, well, gee, she may never even come back. And so, as you're working with people and you're calculating their Social Security balances and you're looking, all those zeros make a difference in those times that they've stepped away. So that really impacts what women have been able to put away. With divorce, the statistics are frightening. Half of the marriages can end in divorce, and it's very concerning that if men were providing 80% of the household money that comes in, they tend to do better, whereas women tend to do worse in most cases. So now you've got somebody who has a 50% chance of being worse off later in life if it ends in divorce, and also being alone because their spouse has passed away. And because of their lack of understanding, it seems like women are more cautious investors. So think about doing the calculations of what money what they have to live on, and you're figuring how many years it has to last. They're starting with a lower balance. They are more cautious investors, so their return is going to be less. And you can understand right away what the problem is, that they're going to have a more difficult time reaching their goals if they are unable to make up that difference. And that's where financial education is so important. In fact, Vanguard said that women's average retirement balance was $76,143, where an average man's balance was $117,270. So you can see the point that women have a ways to go to close that gap. And as our role working with women, we need to help address those concerns. So men and women have different financial priorities. And what I thought was really interesting is that when both men and women were surveyed, women said, 80% of them said, running out of money was their biggest concern, their biggest priority. Whereas men, in almost the same amount, said investment returns was their biggest concern. So women are looking at their priorities in terms of lifestyle and will I be okay and can I pay my bills, whereas men were more about the numbers. And so that's one of the things when we work with clients that we need to be aware that there's a different framework that we need to be aware of when having these discussions. So women are focused on goals. One of the things that has been not just in our industry, but talking to a variety of professionals that work with women in a variety of things, is that women will identify themselves as being perceptive and strong in almost every area except finance. And they're fearful about that. They're fearful at making decisions or making the wrong decision. So one of the things that we can do is help coach them through that. But it's very hard when you're facing something fearfully to make good choices. And that's one of the reasons where we come in. And it is so important because the average age where women are widowed is 59, which is really surprising to me. And 3/4 of married women are on their own by the time that they reach age 75. So that's a startling statistic. And the time to start empowering them to learn about how to manage their money and plan for the future is not at the time that they're facing these life challenges already. So women are also concerned about a steady income and where that's going to come from. And so talking about achieving those goals needs to be also woven into the fact that women will say, when surveyed, that they are most concerned about their fitness and their health, and they find that more important than their long-term retirement goals. And a lot of that has to do with short-term planning and not necessarily long-term planning. And those things can be more finite to them and more immediately tangible, whereas some of the concepts that we're talking about are intangible to our women clients. And so again, changing the conversation, being aware of that, is going to make a big difference in their success and our success in working with them. So who's making the financial decisions? When you have a couple come in many cases, it is the man, but not necessarily. One trick that I've used is when they come in the first time, I'll ask them a question, how did you meet? And then I see who answers first. Often the one that is guiding the conversation in many of the things that they do in their household is the one that speaks up initially. But then I make sure and engage the other one, because one may sit back and be very comfortable in talking to you one-on-one, but is not comfortable talking to you with their partner there. And it's so important that these financial goals are aligned so that they're not working at cross purposes. So it's really important to to look at that. And then another startling statistic is that in so many cases, it was 82% that if the man was making the financial decisions, that they thought it was important to bring the wife in less than half the time, which is very startling in this day and age, because this was done in September of 2018, that women were not more anxious themselves to be a part of this conversation. So that's where we have the opportunity to bring them into the conversation. And often it may be that you bring them in together and then you invite them individually to meet, just to understand their communication preferences, what is most important to each of them, and identify when they're going in opposite directions, because then there's an opportunity to coach and bring them to an understanding of each other's positions, so that you can help them put their goals on the right track together. You always hear opposites attract, and this could be a case where those opposites attracting could cause a big conflict in their financial life. So how do we encourage confidence? One of the things that women did identify as a big challenge is finding time. They're taking on professional roles, personal roles, family roles, fitness roles, and they aren't finding time to make time for their finances. So offering a flexible schedule and finding times that work with their schedule and lifetime is going to make a big difference. Women have identified that trust and confidence and honesty, those attributes are what they're looking for in a financial advisor, well above their investment returns. So being able to feel like they can trust you and that they believe what you're saying and that you're listening to what they're saying is very important. Also think about the way that they are prioritizing goals and helping put them in terms of, will I have enough? Will I run out of money? Can I quit working when I need to quit work, when I want to quit working, as opposed to beating the market, is going to resonate much better with a female client. Another thing that is really important, and I've seen it happen too many times, and it's disappointing that it does, but so many times people genderize the advice and they want to, cover it in pink and make it look like it's what women can understand. And no, we don't need that. We just need that you have an understanding of our challenges that may be different, and the way that we understand and perceive what our finances mean to ourselves and our family. So you want to create an experience, perhaps, to get them engaged. I help clients put their financial papers in order, because so often they'll come to me with a big box of things that they've never looked at and they don't know what the statements are, and something as simple as that, where they're not having to get a financial education completely on day one, helps them feel like they can engage and trust you. That's a very big way to make sure that women understand that you know where they're coming from. Remember that they're also modeling this behavior for their own children. We started talking about their money story, and they're creating a money story for their own families. So seeing their children, seeing them take control and have an understanding and develop confidence is going to help future generations. So women are looking for transparency too. So be very careful about not just telling them what they're doing financially, but showing them what they're invested in, being transparent on how you charge and where their money's going. That again speaks to the trust and the understanding. Now, it's so important because over the next couple of generations, women, according to the Family Wealth Advisor Council, are going to control 2/3 of the U.S. Economy. So imagine that. And we're working toward making sure that these women are empowered and educated and no longer fearful about managing money. So now I'd love to hear questions, and let's continue the conversation.
Okay, Linda, I'll start off with a question. You know, sometimes couples have different ideas about money. And how do you work with those situations?
That's such a good question, because you're right. In fact, very often they do. And one could be a saver and the other's a spender. And they may not even address those things because they're trying to avoid conflict. And I often use a 50-30-20 plan to help them address that. And that's where they're going to take 50% of their income and it's going to go toward their fixed expenses. And so they need to know that that's covered. That 20% is going towards savings, and if there's a debt that they're working toward, can go there. And then that other 30% is their discretionary income. And once those two main things are handled, that gives the couple the permission to have their various ways that they want to handle their discretionary money. They can put it in their don't ask, don't tell separate money if they want, and they can buy gifts for one another, or they can spend on smaller purchases or something like that, so that they still have some money. And it's so important that women do have some money in their own names, because remember, we talked about those divorce statistics. Imagine a woman being on her own and having no credit in her own name, no credit history, no loans, nothing that is in her own name to show that she can move forward. So having that little separate ability to make financial decisions is really helpful. And then bringing them into the meeting and having a conversation about each other's goals and their money management styles can help them be on the same page.
Oh, thank you. I have one more question.
Sure.
You know, I have a daughter who's a millennial, and how do you introduce financial concepts to millennial women to help them build some good money habits?
You know, there's a book that I have used when I sit down with clients, and it's the millennials seem to take to this really well, and it's called The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clausen. And it's parables that talk about good money habits. It's a really quick read, but the concepts are solid. And it talks about saving, and if you get a raise, don't have this lifestyle creep where you spend as much as you make, that you bank the rest, and that it talks about charity and all of the other money habits, but in a way that you can quickly read and understand. And that has been really helpful. And then again, being aware that a lot of the millennials are participating in this gig economy where they're moving from job to job to job, and they may or may not participate in a savings plan through their firm. that they're working with, so we need to talk about that. It could also be that they are going to have the opportunity to look for jobs where student loans are now such a big topic, that there are more and more companies. I just read about Travelers, that if you contribute, if you participate in their 401k plan and you are paying off your student loans, that they will contribute to your retirement plan for you, which is great. So there's things that address their biggest money concerns that can really help them develop good money habits.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple hands raised. I'll start off with Kimberly. Kimberly, do you have a question?
Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for sharing. This is very informative. I have a question.
Yes.
Can you please share with us your experience when you help both husband and wife, and they both have different risk tolerance, different goals? Do you sometimes refer them or recommend that they have separate portfolios or separate advisors? Could you elaborate on that?
Sure, of course. Their risk tolerance will likely be different if they are different ages, particularly. I've got clients right now that I can think of where the husband is almost 30 years older than the wife. And so, of course, for some of his accounts, we are focused on his longevity. And then we're also doing planning for her, because the likelihood that he predeceases her is high. And they are going to have some different risk tolerances, but they're probably going to each have their own retirement accounts. I mean, hopefully that we've encouraged them to do that, and that they may have some joint money for other goals, and they may have some other money that's their individual money. And so you can address each of those for different things depending on what their goals are, so that they do have the ability to have some common goals where they use their money toward common things, and that may be invested differently than some short-term needs versus very long-term needs. So it really helps, and communication is the biggest thing that you can do to help them, is that they understand why you're doing what you're doing, and then help them make the decision to allocate according to their goals in the lifestyle. Remember, the women are really looking toward, am I going to be able to pay my bills? So you're focusing on that. And if the two of them are participating together when they're sitting down with you, they're not working at cross purposes. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much, Linda.
You're welcome.
Mark, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sometimes I've run into women a little bit older who, because of time constraints, their career or other reasons, they and their husband will take very specialized roles when it comes to various things. And one of these tends to be finance, where a very strong wife may just say, look, I just don't have the time for this, and I don't care for this. I'm going to leave it for my husband. How do we bring those women into the idea that they have to become engaged in these discussions?
Well, and that's such a good question too, Mark, because we are fighting their money story. We're fighting the example they grew up with and the cultural and generational roles that they have lived for so many years, and now we're asking them to do something differently. So it's all about approach, that you can say, a step at a time, we're going to just know where everything is. Because if you were ever going to be alone, we don't want to miss something important that you're going to need to make sure you can pay your bills. And then we'll start going through your household expenses and what's important for you to continue. Can we make sure that we have enough to handle those things? And it may be the investment part that is the last topic that gets discussed, and it's more about understanding what we need to make this money last as long as you need to, and what do we need to do, small goals at a time, to slowly get her involved in the conversation. And that does happen quite frequently. And as they start taking control, it's amazing to see how quickly they start learning and understanding. You know, it's pretty common in a lot of the studies they've done that women think they need to be a financial expert before they talk to a financial advisor. And so one of the things we can do is give them permission to come in saying, I don't know anything about this. It's okay to say, I don't know. And that we're not going to dismiss them or gloss over it, but really break it down. So it takes a lot of hand-holding at first, but it's amazing the progress and the things that I've seen in my own practice where I've come across women like that have really turned it around and have really taken giant steps forward. But it's not overwhelming them, not presenting them with the entire financial picture and saying you must learn this today, but bringing it to them in small steps. And it's amazing how resilient even women that were raised with a different gender distinction are starting to step into that conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we have one more question from Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, do you want to ask a question, please?
Oh, please. Thank you. This has been great, and I'm so glad Linda's got so much experience here, and I know she can answer this. I've been dealing with divorced couples for over 30 years now, and 30 years ago, divorce laws were so much different in California, and today I'm seeing more and more women, like you said, 59, 60, where the judge has awarded their former spouse not maybe half or all of their retirement because of the way they work a formula now. There's no such thing as 50-50. They go back for only 4 years, a judge will, and if the man hasn't been working or has only been working part-time, there's some kind of fancy formula, and boom, the woman is just left with nothing or devastated financially. How long does it take for women to recuperate from something like that? How many more years do they have to work to be able to catch up?
Gosh, that's such an important question too. I work with a lot of women that have gone through divorce, and hopefully if you get them before things are final, that you can look at the money that they have said they've needed, and when they fill out their declarations about what their expenses are and their income, that those are accurate, because so often those aren't, and those decisions are being based on that. But when you get somebody that comes into you where they're starting over and they have such little time and so little resources, it's a lot about coaching, and it's a lot about spending plans. I don't use the word budget because that's just one more negative conversation that they really don't want to have, but more spending plan. And things are changing more and more, and I don't know if you're feeling that there was a mistake made, or whether it was really because they felt the woman still was able to go back to work or not able to go back to work, and so getting them feeling comfortable in developing skills and having hobbies. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of women having something, even in happy marriages, that they can step back into the workforce, because so often they retire early and the husband passes away, and now they've been out of the workforce for so long, and they were planning on his income and it's not there anymore, and having to step back in. So there's lots of things you can do, and I have dealt with clients like that, and they have been able to turn it around. There's a lot of tears initially, and there's a lot of getting over the sting of feeling like they didn't get what they wanted out of that division of property and the division of the retirement resources. But there is a light at the end of that tunnel. They can come out the other side. It's just going to mean that they need you more than ever. They need a coach and somebody on their side helping them through this, and that they're not doing this alone.
I'm so glad there's somebody like you out there, Linda. If I have anybody who lives, where are you located, by the way?
My office is in downtown Los Angeles, but I do tell clients that my office is where they are, because that's one of the things that I do is I come to them. You get a lot better understanding of what they're not telling you, which is just as important as what they are telling you sometimes. And so coming to them where they're comfortable, and then giving yourself permission to have that conversation as long as it needs to be said so they really feel heard, is what I think really helps. So I will go to wherever my client is.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Linda, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you doing this. I learned quite a lot today, to be quite honest. So this was very valuable. And on behalf of Cal Lutheran, I also want to thank you as well. Before we wrap up, I just want to let everyone know, if you found this as interesting as I did, and you want to learn more, or you want to take a class from Linda directly, we, Cal Lutheran, have the financial planning program I mentioned in the MBA and the MS. And so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions and know about more information about our program. You can contact our program director, Dr. Charlie Shen, directly, or you can contact our program manager, Cindy Grether, who's joining us today, with any questions. You can also follow the link to learn more about the financial planning program. And then I just wanted to tease, next week we're going to have our host Mark Edwards is going to be talking on tips for advising couples filing for Social Security. This is going to be same time, same place on March 14th. So we look forward to seeing you all there and hope you had a great time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.